Good morning, students. As you can see on my screen, there is nothing to see because I cannot connect my internet right now. I've been trying for the last 10 minutes. I'm not able to. So I cannot open the NCRT site and I can't show the class 10 book or the chapter on it. So now coming back to the topic, yesterday we saw, or rather till yesterday, we have seen that the French Revolution had led to a lot of changes in not just the French society but also in different parts of Europe. Uh, the Germans, the Austrian rulers, all of them had their own headaches and the issues to grapple with. Then, after the revolution, France was never in a stable condition. Political stability was not there. Then that was the turn of Napoleon to bring his own idea of pure republic, and then he also became a king, and he took his idea about the workers' rights and the rights of the people to different parts of Europe, which then was not appreciated by the other ruling families of Europe. So a lot of things were happening at the same time. But then one thing needs to be understood, and very importantly, is that during the earlier times, that is before French Revolution, you only had two class of people: rich and the poor. The political affiliations of poor people, there wasn't any, because they were more concerned about feeding themselves and the families and paying the debts. So there was no time for them to indulge in any kind of political movement or have some great political aspirations of their own. But because of industrial revolution in the 17th and the 18th century, a whole new middle class had been created. The, a class of engineers, a class of doctors, mathematicians, uh, people who used to work in factories. They used to get far better pay than the people who were working in the fields. So all this new, and then a lot of schools and a lot of universities came up. So all this education and the free flow of ideas around them, that created not just a middle class, but then an ideologically inclined middle class, a middle class which wanted to see a lot of ideological changes being done in the society, a middle class which wanted to patronize a lot of a whole new political system, which wanted to get rid of the monarchy, which wanted the powers of the aristocrats, the power of the church uh, to be completely thrown out of the window. They wanted to make it powerless, and so that to ensure that they do not interfere in the daily affairs of the common people. Uh, so all that was happening, and it was not just happening in France, but it was also happening in other parts of Europe. But once Napoleon was gone in 1815, uh, there was a whole new segment that was created in the European society, a segment, a political segment of conservatives who wanted the status quo. That is, the people who wanted the king to be powerful, people who wanted the national armies to be powerful, people who wanted overall nationalism, who propagated a very strong form of nationalism. Then there were the others who were known as the liberals, who wanted enormous amount of freedom, people who wanted less state power, people who wanted the church to be made powerless. uh, then there were others who wanted to strike a balance between the two. They would be known as the centrists, who would not go for a very radical form of conservatism either, and neither were they interested in going for a very liberal form of government as a whole. So as you can see, there was a whole thought process going on, and people were not agreeing on any form of a political ideology, that yes, this is how it should be, because different people, different segments in societies had different ideas. So naturally it is obvious that if you can see it, then that would clearly mean they were not united. Okay, so After 1815, the conservatives became stronger in Europe because the ruling families were back, Napoleon was gone, the Habsburgs were again powerful, the Bourbons, that is the Spanish family, Bourbons were powerful again, the Austrian Habsburgs were powerful again. They had their territories back. Most of the territories which belonged to France was taken away from the French state. So conservatism was back, and again, and the Austrian Chancellor Metternich, as you, if you are going through the chapter, you must have seen his name coming many, many times. And he was the one, he was a pure conservative and a very influential conservative who acted as a glue among different conservative governments around Europe. So, but one thing was certain, that after French Revolution, things could never be the same. The ruling families could not expect to rule forever. They could not expect the things to be as what they were in 18th century. Okay, till at least late 18th century, all that was going to change because people had seen that yes, this system was a very oppressive one, a system where they were, which was run by the king, the ruler, the aristocrats, the church. That was a very oppressive system which ensured that most of the people within the society remained poor. So that system had to be thrown away. But then there was a lot of turmoil because, as I just said, people were not agreeing on which direction to take, because now you had a segment like conservatives, the liberals, the centrists. Then of course there were a lot of people who would like the institution of monarchy to remain. And that is the reason why this the system of upheaval continued, and the society was never stable, neither in France and neither in other parts of Europe. So there is one very important thing, I think it's mentioned in the chapter as well, which happened during this point in time, which was the Irish famine. Now, because of industrial revolution and that the world was opening, that is America had the markets of America had opened, the markets of Europe had opened. Now there was a lot of standardization in even the croppings, that the crop that the farmers used to sow. For example, there were earlier hundreds of varieties of crops. Okay, hundreds of varieties of crops, and particularly when you talk about Irish famine, it was more about potato, or rather it was about potato. So earlier they used to have hundreds of varieties of potatoes, the farmers. So if one strain of potato failed, the other was definitely there to take care of them, to rescue them. But gradually, what started happening was, to make it more commercially viable and to standardize it, the farmers started growing one strain of crop or two strains of crop in the maximum. So, if one strain failed because of the vagaries of nature, then the whole crop would fail. And that's the same thing that happened in Ireland, where hundreds and thousands died of a famine because the potato crop had failed. And the people from Ireland went into different parts of Europe, whether it was in America also, and in different parts of Europe. The people, industrial revolution had happened, the crops were failing, there was not much to eat, so people, all of them wanted to work in factories. There were beggars all in the major capitals of Europe. The people didn't have much to eat, and the ruling families, living in the life of luxury, they were just not able to cope up with the pressure, because they were not able to relate to this deprivation and the extreme hard life that the rest of the people were living. And uh, so that was bound to lead to a whole amount of unrest. So there were two essentially revolutions happened after that, after 1815, that is the Treaty of Vienna. One was in the one revolution was that happened was in 1830, where people wanted to throw the these ruling families, the Austrians and the Bourbons, they just wanted to get rid of them. Uh, but the problem was an enormous amount of disunity. So the Italians, under Mazzini, they did try to bring about certain changes in 1830. It failed. The Italians did not succeed. The Germans wanted to bring about certain changes, bring about their own form of revolution in 1830. They failed because they were not united. The Polish, that is the people of Poland, they wanted to bring about their revolution of their own, but it was just crushed by the Russians. The only people who actually got something out of the whole wave of revolution which had spread all across Europe were the Belgians. That because it was the Belgians who were able to kick out the Dutch from their lands. So they were the only ones who can actually be said to have got something out of 1830 revolution, because they were finally now independent. Otherwise, in rest of parts of Europe, the national armies were very successful in suppressing these uprisings in different parts of Europe, because one of the very important reason is firstly that they were not united. They had different political ideologies, though they had the leaders who were there, who were working very hard to bring them together under one umbrella. But then the divisions were very deep, and the ruling families, they were able to exploit it. And the second very important reason was that the army the army was always under these ruling families, the kings. Okay, it was the kings and the aristocrats who used to control the army. So the civilians, if they are on the streets, ultimately, if the whole military force is unleashed on its own people, the civilians cannot hold the ground for long. So in 1830, the revolutions failed in most parts of Europe. But then you have to understand that militarily, of course, there were failures, but there were gains in the other areas. Those gains we would be talking about tomorrow. Thank you.